Actually, just to start recording. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about AMC and Berks Nature's Community Science Project. My name is Danielle Gutman, and I'm the Mid-Atlantic Conservation Outreach Manager with the Appalachian Mountain Club.
And I'm Sarah Chudnovsky. I'm a land protection specialist with Berks Nature, where I focus on the Kittatinny Ridge.
During this webinar, we're going to be teaching you how to use iNaturalist, the app, as well as why we're pursuing this community science project. In tonight's presentation, we'll start by introducing our organizations. We'll go over the Appalachian Trail Corridor, which is where this research project is focusing. We'll take a few minutes to discuss climate change and how it's associated with the project. We'll talk about what the term phenology means and what we mean by studying plant phenology. Then we'll move to the iNaturalist app, where we'll tell you how to download it, how to become a user, and how to join our project. And finally, we'll end with a question and answer segment as time allows. This presentation is being recorded and will be distributed afterwards to all registrants. We will also be posting it online on our different websites. We will try to be monitoring the chat during this presentation, but as it's just the two of us, we might not catch everything. So if you have a question, we will be pausing for a designated question and answer time in the middle of the presentation, as well as at the end. So make sure to ask your questions then. So conservation, what does it mean exactly? At AMC, our conservation work comprises of 4 categories. The first is research and science, where AMC's goal is to provide credible and reliable scientific information and analysis to support AMC's positions and actions across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Second is the policy and advocacy work, where we try to influence public decisions that determine the fate of the places, the quality of the environment, and the quality of the recreational experiences. Third is trail building and stewardship, which includes trails that physically connect people and promote landscapes with hands-on stewardship of the places that our members have enjoyed over the time. And finally, through land protection, through our work to promote permanent conservation of important ecological, recreational, and scenic resources across the region. These protected lands help connect large landscapes, ensure trail connectivity, and provide open spaces in or near heavily populated areas. This slide provides a look at the landscape that AMC covers. Included in it is the landscape that Berks Nature also works in. The lighter green color on the map indicates the lands that AMC protects with our conservation partners, such as Berks Nature. The orange indicates the AMC research areas, where our research department studies air quality, forest and alpine ecology, and climate change, just to name a few. Just a side note, this slide deck will also be made available following the webinar, so any links you see in the slides you will be able to access.
And at Berks Nature, we are glad to work with the AMC on various projects, and one of those is the land protection side of things. So Berks Nature is a land trust that works across Berks County, as well as a little bit of Lebanon County, and especially for the Appalachian Ridge, we work with Schuylkill County as well. And so we believe that nature is essential to our quality of life. And so we work to protect land, especially in key priority areas and in certain watersheds. We really strive to support the overall health of the Schuylkill River and Delaware River watersheds. And so we do that through education projects, working with townships and municipalities on the hyper-local level. So AMC is our partner working on some of those higher policy levels, and we are really in the weeds of particular townships and school districts and different communities across Berks. And so we do a little bit of everything, but at the heart of what we do is protecting land using conservation easements, acquiring land and transferring it to public agencies, and also occasionally acquiring land ourselves and adding it to public preserves that we have across Berks County. And so a big part of our approach is that in addition to having public land be open, we also really want to protect private land and partner with many landowners across Berks to get that done. And so I do a lot of work on the Kittatinny Ridge, doing landowner outreach to landowners who own land in the Appalachian Corridor. as part of the Kittatinny Ridge Coalition, which is a group of land trusts working all along the Blue Mountain Kittatinny Ridge in Pennsylvania. And that's what brings me to getting to work with communities along the ridge for community science projects like this with the AMC. So now we're going to get into what the Appalachian Trail Corridor is and why we're studying it. So on the right is a map of how the research project is defining the Appalachian Trail Corridor. So the blue line is watershed boundaries. We're looking at the watersheds that line the whole region, and then the red is the Appalachian Trail itself. So we take the Appalachian Trail as a spine sort of, and then get to work outward from there to protect the land and also do research for all of the land around the Appalachian Trail in the corridor. And then on the left, we're looking at iNaturalist observations, which is that crowdsourced community data that we're going to talk about a lot tonight. And these are the existing observations that are part of the research project. And as you can see, all of those orange squares are really clustered in New England and then down in the southern region of the Appalachian Ridge. But we have this huge gap in the mid-Atlantic, especially in Pennsylvania. And so what we're looking to do is to support the AMC in filling that gap and asking for all of your help to collect data about flower bloom time so that we can fill in the gaps and get better, more comprehensive research. So we're going to be studying plants, but the Appalachian Corridor is so important for the migration of so many different types of wildlife. This map is showing some of those patterns that are followed for migration by mammals, birds, and amphibians. A lot of people are familiar with the way the Kittatinny Ridge and the Blue Mountain and the Appalachian Corridor is internationally, arguably like globally important bird area and migration route. Hawk Mountain is an anchor of that here in Pennsylvania, but even beyond the hawks, there's so many types of animals that rely on that intact corridor to make their annual migrations and complete their life cycles and keep the whole system going. So we are also asking a lot of questions about how climate change is going to be impacting all of the wildlife, as well as the plants and all the flora and fauna. So we're going to be looking at those questions around how climate change is impacting the plants that are located along all of these corridors, because there is more research out there already about the wildlife themselves. So here's a zoom in of the Appalachian Ridge in Pennsylvania, where we call it the Kittatinny Ridge, which comes from a Lenape word for endless mountain. And in this map, you can see the light green is land that's already permanently protected and conserved. And then the dark green is land that's privately owned and unprotected. And so with the land protection side, we're looking to protect the whole ridge. But if we're looking at collecting data from the public, we really rely on public lands to do that. And so this is we also rely on private landowners to protect their property and to manage it well. But this is a unique way that, because the Appalachian Trail cuts through almost the entire area, we have this unique lens into a lot of land that otherwise we wouldn't, because it's private, and it's much easier to organize people who are on the trails than every single landowner, though we are trying with every landowner for getting land protected. So it's a really important area and has a lot of importance for climate resilience, which we're going to talk more about.
Thank you, Sarah. So now let's move on to climate trends and talk about how they impact and direct our work. As you all know, we're experiencing climate change around the globe. In Pennsylvania specifically, we're seeing impacts to snowfall, temperature, and rainfall, among many other things as well. According to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, there's been a 20 to 60% decrease in snow cover since the early 1900s. They state in their report that winter recreation won't survive past the mid-century for the state of Pennsylvania, and that's going to have huge economic impacts as well as a loss of an entire industry. As far as temperature goes, Pennsylvania's annual temperature is projected to increase by 5.4 degrees by 2050. with the number of days with a heat index above 90 degrees predicted to rise from 8 to 40 days per year. And finally, rainfall. In the Northeast, the maximum daily rainfall has increased by 27% from 1901 to 2016. In Pennsylvania alone, precipitation has increased by 0.37 inches per decade within this past century. All of these changes impact the ecosystems and therefore all living organisms within them. This project aims to better understand what kind of impacts the climate is having on flowering plants and just how severe those impacts are. The Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry has indicated what is now a high risk to climate change. These include cold water habitats for native trout species, severe insect outbreaks, increased tree mortality, in part due to the insect outbreaks, such as the emerald ash borer with the ash trees, expansion of invasive species, and the decline of rare, threatened, and endangered species due to ecosystem losses. Some direct examples in Pennsylvania of this are the hemlocks that shade cold water streams. They are considered especially at risk of climate change, and we are already seeing a decline in them, which in turn is impacting the streams and the fish that live there. The USDA Forest Vulnerability Assessment has also shown that snowshoe hare are reducing their range to primarily just in the northern part of Pennsylvania. This is directly due to the reduction of snow cover that we talked about in the last slide. And finally, the purple martin songbird is seeing the impacts of earlier green up and insect emergence. They are unable to depart earlier, migrate faster, or claim breeding sites earlier, which would be a potential response to the earlier insect emergence, thus impacting their survival. So what are the ways in which plants can respond to climate change? They really only have three options. They can move to where the climate is more suitable. That can be done through dispersal of seeds, such as birds, as in the image. They can adapt to a new climate, or they can become extinct.
So we're already seeing so many changes, and the information that Danielle just went over is fairly intense levels of change that we're going to be experiencing here. And so that's another reason why we're looking at plants too, and especially, as I'm about to talk about, mountains as this idea of climate change refugia. We know that nowhere is untouched by climate change, but we're looking at climate adaptation and resilience, adaptation and mitigation, and what areas might be more resilient. And for those areas that are resilient, how can we promote, support other regions to also gain some of those resilience factors? And so mountains are seen by and have been labeled by the USGS as having more factors that make them resilient and make the wildlife and plants there have a little bit more room to adapt and more buffered from some of those wild extremes that we're going to be experiencing and already are around temperature and precipitation events. And so some of the factors that mountains have that are unique are the snowpack. I think we just saw here in Berks, like 3 weeks ago, there was a huge storm, and in Reading and Philly, there wasn't that much snow, but up on the Appalachian Trail, there was 6 inches that stuck around. So not only do they gain more snow at higher elevations, but it also is able to stick around longer and then therefore more slowly percolate back into the groundwater. And then also because they're forested, that forest cover and that can buffer the local temperature maximums and minimums throughout the year and provide more shelter. It can keep water cooler, which means cooler groundwater and better habitat for trout and other wildlife that depend on cool streams to survive and thrive. And then lastly, well, at least the last one I'll touch on today is that there's a lot of topographically complex terrain and a lot of diverse microclimates that can be found at when there's a range of topography and also elevation. So it gives those microclimates might protect certain areas of plants, but also can give more room for plants and animals to move up and down in elevation. And so a lot of the project that this is that we're working on, or the AMC is working on that we're supporting here, is looking at to what extent are mountains going to be able to serve as climate change refugia, and what's happening on them, so that we can be aware and can adapt in the ways that we can. So this brings us to talking about phenology, which is the timing of seasonal changes in plants from year to year, such as flowering, and the relationship with weather and climate. So like Danielle mentioned earlier with the purple martin, the way all ecosystems work is that a lot of things need to happen at the same time every year and in conjunction. So for those purple martins, they need the insects to be emerging at the same time so they can eat them and then feed them to their young. So there's all these things that are interconnected, and we're looking at how climate change is impacting phenology, that timing of seasonal changes, and how to track it and how to be more aware. So there's also been a lot of work modeling what this is going to look like in the future, in addition to tracking what changes are already happening. So there's a lot of ways to look at phenology and a lot of different factors you could pick up, and many scientists do pick different ones. But what we're doing for this community science project is what the AMC researchers are looking at is the start of spring and tracking when does it first begin. And so we know that it is happening earlier, but how do we define spring and how do we track when it's beginning? So the scientists define spring as when the first trees leaf out, and also when the first flowering plants start to bloom. And so on the West Coast, it's easier to track by when the first leaves come out, but on the East Coast, we have this all of these flowering spring ephemeral flowering ephemeral plants that come up in the forest, and they work to use that window of time before the trees have leafed out, where the sun is hitting the forest floor directly. And so these spring ephemeral flowers can pop up and maximize the sun in that earlier window and do that part of their life cycle before the trees leaf out and then the year progresses onward. And so this map that we have up here that's showing those different earlier spring onsets is actually not a map of what is currently happening. It's a model of looking at how the past 10 to 30 years compare against the 112-year record and then projecting that into the future. So that we wanted to include the model to show that like a lot of this is very somewhat predictable, and that we are trying to get ahead of some of that so that as spring moves earlier, we can start capturing the data to show how much earlier it's going. And also then this other question that we'll get into of, is spring happening earlier, less early on mountains? And is that going to show that mountains can be climate change refugia? That's what we're looking to find out. So this gets more into that question of phenology. And so when we're looking, and these AMC scientists are looking at the whole corridor from Maine to Georgia. So spring varies, the beginning of spring and phenology markers vary so widely among such a broad landscape with so many different changes in latitude and longitude and altitude and elevation. So while they're collecting all of that data, they are able to kind of glean those questions of, well, how much earlier is it? And also, is it different between elevation? Is spring happening more quickly at lower elevations than higher elevations? We're able to compare some of that because phenology is very predictable. It follows something called Hopkins' law, which is that generally phenological events vary at the rate of 4 days for each degree of geographic latitude. It varies by 4 days for 5 degrees of geographic longitude, and for each 400 feet in altitude. So by going up every 400 feet, spring is 4 days later or earlier. So they're able to track using that. That's kind of what influences the models, but by looking at that really predictable pattern that we also have in a 112-year record, they're able to look at how phenology is varying between this whole project area. But we can't do any of that without collecting more data.
So here are AMC's previous and ongoing phenology tracking projects. AMC has been doing this work, albeit not through iNaturalist, since 2004. In 2019, we launched the iNaturalist project entitled Northeast Alpine Flower Watch, and it was quite successful and helped with the creation of this project. So any examples we're going to be using throughout this presentation are going to be coming directly from the Northeast Alpine Flower Watch. This slightly blurry map is actually incredibly helpful in showing the number of observations that members of the community, such as yourselves, make through iNaturalist. This specific map shows the Northeast Alpine Watch project versus the observations that scientists made at the Alpine Phenology sites through the NPN, which is the National Phenology Network. It further shows us how much we rely on hikers, outdoor enthusiasts, and local community members to contribute to this research. The iNaturalist observations shown with the orange dots vastly outnumber the green dots, which are the National Phenology Network sites. This is exactly why we are asking you, the community, to help with our current project. We can just get so much more done when we all work together. To help bring that point home, let's take a look at an example from the Northeast Alpine Watch project. For this species, Dipensia, in 2019, iNaturalist observations provided 3.5 times more data than the National Phenology Network's plots alone. These increased observations on iNaturalist were able to tell us more accurately the first flowering and the average flowering of the Dipensia, which was earlier than what just the NPN plots alone were showing. So this is great proof that the iNaturalist observations are doing a great job to catch the first signs of spring.
So let's talk a little bit more about iNaturalist itself. It's this phone app that we've been referencing, but it's actually, well, big thunder is happening. What a day of rain. So you can go to the next slide. It's a really long one. So iNaturalist is this program that is an existing app, and anyone can download it on their phone or computer. And it has a community of over 2 million observers, which, as you can see, are all over the world. And it's really great for collecting research because in addition to taking a photo and uploading it, you can add a date and then also a geotag location, which is the really critical part to see where the flowers are blooming. And then it also allows for additional information to be input, which can get the information that is collected up to the quality of a research standard so that the AMC scientists can access it and publish it in scientific journals. And so they are able to put in specific coding to the project that allows phenology fields to be added by the scientists. And it's ongoing. So year after year, it's all there and people can keep adding to it. And so as long as people are uploading photos, data is being collected. And so it really allows us this, this concept of community science to come to life, where a lot of communities are participating in knowledge production and in science and collecting data and then helping to evaluate why it matters. So that's pretty much the overview of what we're doing with the project and what iNaturalist is. And then we will go into a little bit more about the project itself and show all of you how to use iNaturalist. So before we get into that part of the presentation, I just want to pause for a minute and see if there are any questions or anything like that that people are chewing on that we want to address before we move on.
I was just wondering,
go ahead.
How does longitude affect bloom time? Latitude I get, longitude not so much.
I'm not sure. I think that's a really good question as well. And this is where we're really glad to have this team of research scientists that we can go to with that question. So we will ask them and get back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Is the recording of non-native or native species helpful to this project? Yeah, we will go into which species a little bit more after this, but really you can enter anything and it's helpful as long as, I guess if you enter every single plant, you don't get very far in the trail, but we'll go into what species we're looking in mostly. Oh, I will say there is another similar app called iMap Invasives. That's really a go-to place for inputting invasive species, because then land stewards can go and tackle them. But that's for, I guess, a different webinar.
All right, not seeing any more questions or any more hands, so let's move on.
So this project specifically is called Flowers and Fauna along the Appalachian Trail Corridor. And iNaturalist, anything put in there through crowdsourcing will be moved towards the project, but we do have a specific project within it that helps pull things together. And so our goal is to generate thousands of iNaturalist observations. It's so much more useful to research when we have a lot of information to draw on, so that we can really zoom in and identify when someone spotted leaves of a flower, but not the flower yet. And then the next week or the next day, there's a flower, so we can track when spring really begins. And so improving that like time coverage, but also improving geospatial coverage and looking at the level of variability. And then the scientists will compare the crowdsourced obtained iNaturalist peak flowering digital observations, people seeing flowers, taking a photo and putting them in the app. They'll compare that with the nearby National Phenology Network, which is the scientists that do this as their life's work. They have plot observed peak flowering data that they're collecting in certain areas, but like Danielle showed earlier with that slide where there were a few orange dots and then many yellow dots, those scientific plot observed data processes, there's so much less data there. So the scientists will compare that with what we're collecting to make sure it's accurate, but it also really helps fill it out. And then additionally, the scientists will keep evaluating the role of crowdsourced citizen science data in meeting science goals and getting to then share their outcomes with participants. So in the fall, or the winter, there will be another call where they're sharing an update of what they're learning. And so this project really has this goal of connecting those researchers who are really in tune with what's happening with climate change, really to everyday trail users and dog walkers who frequent these areas and love and care for them and are in tune with their specific spot. We can really connect those, and then we all can have a bigger picture by looking at all of these different spots along the mountain corridor. So let's look at our project page as of February 2022. Flowers and Fauna along the Appalachian Trail Corridor. This has been going on since 2019. So this is just the first year that it's really advancing down to be focused on our mid-Atlantic area. Sorry, I lost my notes for a minute. But this is where we're at so far. So as you can see, there's a ton of observations, over thousands, and then there's 199 project members. Maybe one of you will be the 200th project member. We can find out tonight. But so we really encourage people to sign up as project members, but if someone hasn't done that and they're just out there, don't even know this is happening, and they take a photo and upload it, if it's high enough quality, it will still count towards the project. So you don't have to be a member, and also we can use the data from anyone who's out there.
All right, so getting started with iNaturalist. This is just a quick overview of the app. So first thing you would have to do is you'd have to download the app on your phone from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Then you would need to create an account before you're able to begin uploading pictures to projects. When you do go to upload a picture, you are going to record the coordinates of your picture as well as the accuracy of your location, which I'll get into more in a minute. Next is to determine what you've just taken a picture of. You can input that information yourself if you feel confident, or if you're unsure, leave it up to the iNaturalist community to help identify your species. If you decide to upload your pictures once you get home or at a later date, which is not recommended, but understandable if your phone dies or an emergency happens, make sure you record the date of your encounter. So the date that you took the picture, not the date that you upload it to iNaturalist, because that will throw off the data completely. And finally, be sure to include evidence of what you saw. So take multiple pictures from multiple different angles. You're allowed to upload a bunch of pictures per observation, which is great. If there's fruit on the plant, be sure to include that. Also, make sure your pictures are well framed and clear, not blurry, to help with any identification needs. So a quick step-by-step for uploading a contribution. When you download the app, you go ahead and open it. There's going to be a button that says Observe. That's where you can go take your picture. So you can add one or more clear and well-framed photos as your evidence. Then you're going to enter what you saw, or again, leave it blank if you need help with identifying the species. Then you're going for the date and time. They should be automatically added when you upload your picture. Just be sure if you're uploading at a different time, as I mentioned in the last slide, that you accurately put in the date and time that you actually took the picture. And although it says that it's automatically added into the app when you take a picture, it's always best to just check and make sure that it's accurate. Your location will also be added automatically when you take the picture. If not, you're going to have to check your privacy settings on your app and on your phone to make sure that you are allowing the app to use your location. It's very important to note the accuracy of your location. So you can see on the slide, there's that little map with the blue dot. When you go into the app on your phone, you'll see just the same thing, and it'll give you a percentage of accuracy that they think it is. So just go in no matter what you're doing and make sure that your location is as accurate as possible. And then you can go ahead and save your observation and start a new one. For a project-specific example, when you open the iNaturalist app and you go to upload a picture to the project, you'll see a screen similar to this one, where you can pick the project you want to add your contribution to. I know on the slide here, it shows the Northeast Alpine Flower Watch being clicked on. Obviously, when you go to do it yourself, you're going to want to click the flowers and fauna of the Appalachian Trail Corridor, so the one above that is unclicked. When you select your project, you will be asked a series of questions. And the questions that are shown on the screen are the same ones that you will get for the flowers and fauna of the Appalachian Trail Corridor. So, do you see flowers or flower buds? Are the flowers open? Take an educated guess on the percentage of fresh flowers open, if any. Is it a past flower? And are there any fruit? The great thing about iNaturalist is that it allows you to add fields to your own project. So the Phenology fields you just saw in that last slide are based on the National Phenology Network protocol, and our scientists at AMC went ahead and added these to the project. So to go into a little bit more detail on them, flower or flower buds refers to one or more freshly open or unopened flowers or flower buds visible on the plant. This does not include wilted or dead flowers. Open flowers refers to one or more open, fresh flowers visible on the plant. Percentage fresh flowers open refers to an estimate of the percentage of all fresh flowers. This includes the buds, unopened and opened, on the plant. Past flower means that one or more petals have wilted or fallen off. And fruit, if one or more fruits at any stage of maturity are visible on the plant, then you're going to go ahead and say yes to that one. Now we're going to talk about data quality and curation and why it's so important for this project. Here you see Diapensia, again, the example from the Northeast Alpine Watch project. So for each upload, each observation that you make, we are looking for research grade observations. And what that means is that the observation you've uploaded has been properly identified and agreed upon by at least 2 members. So even if you know that what you're uploading is Diapensia, for example, someone else is also going to have to take a look and agree before it's considered a research grade observation. When submitting an observation, we would also encourage quality when it comes to the accuracy of filling out the phenology fields. So it's really important to understand what each field is asking to ensure the best quality research. And the phenology fields, again, are the fields that I just went over in that last slide. So percentage of flower open, fruit, all those questions. We also are stressing the importance of having an accurate geolocation. So please be sure to double check that field as you're going through your submission. And finally, the more observations made to our project, the more accurate the data will become in determining when spring is starting.
So I think that there is this question by Seth of, has the accuracy of plant identification by iNaturalist observations to NPM plot observations been assessed? And I think that what Danielle went over really just did speak to that, but we can just add that the Northeast Flower Watch project that Danielle's been referencing, that has been going on for a number of years. And at that point, they really tweaked how to make sure that this community science data is at the standard and compared it across. So we kind of have the advantage in the Mid-Atlantic of getting to have this project that's already been ironed out and ready to go. So as part of that, the scientists at AMC identified 8 different species that are the target plants, that they think these plants are some of the earliest bloomers and sort of make the best, capture the best idea of when spring begins. And so I'm going to go over all 8 of them, and then there's a few others that are also early bloomers that are, you know, good indicators. And so some of these target plants, there aren't that many or maybe even no observations already recorded in iNaturalist. So we're really hopeful that us getting together out there this spring yields some observations and helps us assess what's here. So some of them might be flowers or plants that people aren't familiar with, and it's kind of also a chance for us to get to learn new species and also to really just take a picture of what you see out there and upload it so that then it can get identified. So the first one is Clintonia Borealis Bluebeard lily. So each photo kind of shows the progression of the plant from the flowering and fruiting and close up to fruits. So I'll kind of go through and I'll try to be a little slow so you can really take a look and identify the characteristics of each plant. So the next one is one of my favorites, the painted Trillium, Trillium undulatum. And so this is pretty distinctive because of the 3 leaves and the white flowers, though there are also other species of Trillium that you might spot out there and which you should still also upload. So again, pretty distinctive 3 leaves and 3 petal structure, and then the little red fruit. So the next one is another Trillium, the red Trillium. And as you can see, that distinctive 3-leaf pattern just really gives them away and helps them be one of the easiest ones. But as you can see at the bottom too, there's just a whole range of colors that you might see, reddish brown, maroon, purple, pale yellow, or white. Really, we're trying to just see capture any Trillium that you see. And then the next one is Canada Mayflower. I know for sure that I've seen this blooming at the spot that I really like to go hiking at in Berks County. And it's very small. The flowers are those little white ones on the left, and then the fruit is this red berry. I'm not using any kind of scientific language here, but I want to spend a little time just looking at it and observing so that, you can get familiar when it's time to go out there. And then this is another favorite, which is also very early. This one probably already is happening, the yellow trout lily, called the trout lily because the leaves have this mottled pattern that looks like trout. And also, I mean, it's when the trout are out and active. So there's, again, sometimes the species names tie into some of those phenology markers of when different wildlife or insects are around and beginning their year. So the yellow trout lily is one that really shows when spring begins, and I think is one that's really common in our area. So hopefully people can start getting out there in the next week and try and capture it before we miss the bloom. The next one is the 3-tooth cinquefoil. Looks like it's in the rose family and has, really distinctive leaves. And then the next one is a viburnum. So it's actually a shrub called hobblebush. And as you can see, it has a false petal with a real flower below it. So it's really interesting. And I think this is one that will be easy to spot if it's out there. Canadian bunchberry, another flower with red fruits. And you can see this is different than the Trillium, different number of 4 petals, different number of leaves. And then here are 8 additional spring indicators. So these aren't the ones identified by the scientists as their top research priorities, but they're also really good indicators, and a lot of them are also a lot more common. So we want to share those, and again, really just encourage you to capture any flower that you spot and put it in there. But these are the ones, if you really are targeting, these are the ones to look for. So we have the cut-leaved toothwort, the mountain wood sorrel, Dutchman's breeches, the mayapple, Jack in the pulpit, Carolina spring beauty, Greenland stitchwort, and then bloodroot, which again is also probably beginning very soon if it hasn't already. And so I also want to add that all 8 of these target species are flowers that are not incredibly sensitive species. The scientists and us, like, we really focus on plants that we feel comfortable having that geotag location be publicly available. So we're not looking at really sensitive endangered species or orchids that we don't want to be at risk for people taking or trampling. We're looking at our more common species that we think are around and that aren't at that kind of risk. Though of course we also really encourage everyone to be an ambassador for leaving flowers there and not picking them or removing them. And so one other goal of the community science project and outreach is to really spread the word about how special these plants are and how we should just take pictures and not otherwise disturb them. So we're nearing the end of our presentation, and we want to pivot to inviting all of you to join this project and explaining how to do that. So if you would like, you can put your email in the chat and type yes to let us know that we should reach out to you to get involved. And also we could take a minute here on this webinar to just get out your phone and download the iNaturalist app, or search for it on the Android or Apple store and just start to download it. So then after we get off the call, you can start to take a look at it. And then really we're looking to start the project as soon as possible. Spring is starting to happen, and we know April is this peak month for a lot of flowers to start blooming. So we really, encourage you to start getting out there. And let's see. There are some questions too. I will get to that. And I think that I can kind of speak to that question of, are we looking high in the mountains or down lower on the trail? Okay. So yeah, really, when we showed that map in the beginning of the Appalachian Trail Corridor, we're looking at that whole watershed level. So for example, in Berks County, anywhere in the upper Tulpehocken watershed reaches is going to count. So it doesn't have to be really out there in a remote area. It can be the place where you walk your dog every day that's on the edge of the mountain. But we are using the Appalachian Trail itself sort of as this organizational feature. But when looking at data, collecting data, going all the way out from there. Maybe you could also speak to that more, Danielle. But I will also say that another way to get involved is to volunteer at Trailheads. So for Berks County, I'm going to be out at some trailheads on most weekends throughout April and most of May, just talking to people as they're out there to spread the word about the project. And so we definitely need more volunteers to help with that. And then there's also AMC visitor centers and facilities that will be reaching out to people, and we could use your help getting involved there. So really there's, wherever you're located geographically, there's a place to get involved.
I'll just chime in real quick and say, as far as AMC goes, we are looking to host some events, or at least have some sort of printed resources available at the Mohican Outdoor Center in New Jersey, as well as the Harriman State Park at our 2 visitor centers there. So AMC people, who are on emailing lists, stay tuned. We should hopefully have more information on all of that shortly.
And because it's an ongoing project, there's going to be an update at the end of the year about what was learned and what's happening. And then of course, we'll be doing this year after year. So you can also stay tuned to get that call with the scientists to hear what they found from what everyone was reporting. And yeah, I think we can see if there are any questions, if there's anything that we missed. This is your chance.
I know someone had put it in the chat earlier. For those who joined a couple seconds late, we did mention that this webinar is being recorded. We will be uploading, well, actually the recording will be sent via email to everyone who is registered. And then I know Sarah and I will also be putting it on our organization's websites. We will also be making sure that this PowerPoint is available, so you can click on any links that you see. And you can get our emails that are up on the screen now if you miss them. So yeah, we just want to say, if there are any more questions, we're happy to answer them. But really, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Peter, yes, I will get printed materials to distribute for the chapter hikes. And I will see what I can do about the AT Fest on June 11th.
Yeah, we're excited to get such a good response and really looking forward to seeing some of you out there on the trails. Oh, we have one question. How do we add the project on our iNaturalist?
So let me just make sure I'm telling you the right thing. I'm just going to pull up my iNaturalist just really quickly. So when you pull up the app on your phone, on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there's going to be like a little briefcase symbol, and it's going to say projects underneath it. You can use the little magnifying glass at the top of that screen when you click it to search, and all you'll have to do is type in the name of our project. So flowers and fauna along the Appalachian Trail Corridor. It will show up as an AMC project, and that's how you know you have the right one. I think there's only one that's called this. So, but again, if you have any questions, if you have any difficulties using the app or getting started at all, please don't hesitate to just email Sarah and I. We are more than happy to just walk you through it.
Yeah, thanks again for coming.
All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. So yeah, just to reiterate, we really appreciate you all joining this evening. And we really look forward to getting a bunch of more observations, and having community science contribute to research is just a really exciting thing. So thank you all very much.
Bye.